I've got to say, like, I do this a little bit and I've done quite a lot of presentations with Parsi, and you do get a bit of a feel for the room. And on coming in, I was really feeling a very positive vibe, and I could listen to Parsi all day. Can you imagine the pressure of teaching Parsi Selberg's kids? Hey? No performance anxiety whatsoever. Worse still, parent-teacher interviews. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Selberg, or Professor Parsi, please, having a seat. Yeah, I can't imagine how bad that would be. Now, I was introduced as an expert in education, and I am. But what I would say is I'm also working with people who are experts. You will not be seated in this room unless you've got an equivalent sort of amount of experience as I do. Okay, so I just want to dispel any myth that I've got any special insight or anything like that. I've just had a different experience. All right, and so I want to get that off the ground because TC, or Templestowe College as it's known, it has now got a national reputation and an international reputation, but it almost happened by accident, is what I have to say. The school was a complete basket case. I've been in education for just over 25 years. I got an early break, so I've had 20 years as either assistant principal or principal, but it was fairly much in mainstream contexts. All I needed to do was move into the affluent suburbs of Melbourne, okay, the southeastern suburbs. That was I was commuting like an hour and 15 to 90 minutes a day, and I needed to move into the eastern suburbs. And it's very difficult to get a transfer in the state system into the affluent area. And the only school that I could get was Templestowe, and they told me when I arrived that there were 450 students. And we all know that when you look at an ad for a job, they always exaggerate the numbers. So I wasn't surprised when I had 400 students when I got there. What I didn't anticipate that it was term 4, and in 2 weeks' time, we had 160 year 12s leaving, and I had 23 year 7s coming in. So I went to the school thinking I had 450, and then on arrival found that I'd gone down to 256 within 2 weeks. So, my stats weren't going well, if you know what I mean. So I guess I need to explain that with the FSA, and my reason for being here today is that we work with 43 schools across Australia, and we've just started started working with our first school in New Zealand. And I will spend a little bit of time talking to you about the Future Schools Alliance at some point. But unashamedly, I want to work with schools in Queensland. In comparison to the number of schools that we have in other jurisdictions, Queensland, we've just for whatever reason got fewer schools. And so unashamedly, I want to work with you, not do it to you, not think that, not think that you're going to become anything like Templestowe College, because I'm highly aware and conscious that ours was a particular situation, a particular context at a particular time. It happened. Not everything that we tried sort of worked first time or anything like that. But over the course of 8 years, we found out a lot of things that do work. Now, I don't know how you felt, but Parsi, by the end of that, I was actually depressed. All right? I was did anyone sort of slightly start to feel depressed by the end of that? No? You're not being honest, or you just don't want to offend Parsi? He's, Angry, damn angry. And, particularly if you've got kids, right, or grandkids or anything like that. But how long can you work within the system before you actually become complicit in the problem? Do you get what I'm saying with that? Like, how long can you continue to be part of the system before you actually have to look around and say, actually, I'm reinforcing the problem? And I guess why I love working with Parsi, and Parsi's a friend, official, capital F, capital A, friend and advisor, along with Yong Zhao, Professor Yong Zhao, along with Jan Owen, along with Tom Markham, who's Mr. PBL in the world. And those guys work at the top level, all right? So all the things that, we're angry about and frustrated about when we hear that, they've got the ear of the politicians, all right? For whatever reason, we're one of the few professions where we don't actually control our own profession. Would we agree? Like the people actually doing it on the ground have sort of somehow been sabotaged both by academia and by politicians, and they're sort of running the show. Now, you can get angry about that, or you can just go, that's the way it is. In the position that I'm in, I haven't got the power to change that, so I'm going to do what I can do. Does that sound fair? So what can I do? So I found myself in this position at TC, and we were surrounded, we're close to the Q belt of schools, which is the highest concentration of independent schools in the Southern Hemisphere. All right, and not surprisingly, because it is a well-off area, we're also surrounded by some high-performing state schools. But they were all doing the same private school formula, if you know what I mean. You know, that sort of elite thing. But what it wasn't catering for was those students for whom school didn't fit. All right, and so we started our journey looking at how can we work with those kids, you know, for whom the system's not fitting. Now, I would contend that no matter, even in your highest performing schools, school isn't working for all kids. Now, I was talking with Greg Whitby from Parramatta Diocese in Sydney yesterday, and he is quoting the statistic that on any one day, we're only getting 70% of students coming to school, roughly. 70% of students coming to school. Of those that do, the Grattan Institute says that 40% are actually disengaged at any one time. So we're only getting 70% of people turning up, and of those people, 40% are disengaged. His contention, and it's one that I agree with, is that the young people are voting with their feet. All right? And so what I would like to do today is actually enter into a conversation with you. All right, and so Parsi and I have, I think, agreed that we'll run the workshop together, if that's okay. And hopefully after lunch, where you've got that table time to work, you know, on what are you going to do on Monday, we're going to, I think we've agreed, give it over to you to decide, do you want us to continue sort of running a workshop, or do you guys just want to do it yourselves and we'll, you know, sit in the corner? All right, so can we have an agreement that, because Parsi started his talk by saying this is personal for me, okay? This is what I do. I'm passionate about supporting other schools along the journey. I'm assuming, and I'm pretty confident in this, that you want that too. Is that fair? But it's going to have to mean that we change the mental model, all right? The mental model of how we do a conference, because you know, this is how we do conferences. You come in, who had performance anxiety or pressure when they walked into this space? Okay, one. Yeah, why? Why, Teresa?
Why? It's my duty.
Yeah, you're on show. Did anyone else have it? No? Because you knew that your mental model of a conference is, I'm going to come in, going to listen to these people. Yeah, I might take it on, might not. Could be a good day. Let's see what the lunch is like. Untrue? So my challenge to you is to flip that and become a co-facilitator, okay? Like, you know, if you want to say it, just get it out there, okay? Particularly, not so much, there's people in this room that will have a comment on anything. You know who they are, don't you, right? You know, there's always going to be one person that every conference always asks the question. But if you're the person that doesn't normally ask the question, today I want you to change, all right? I want you to have that conversation on your table. I want you to ask what's on your mind out loud. Yeah? What would you like to know? Basically, from when we moved to a compulsory schooling age of 17, because up until that stage, young people could actually leave far earlier, and certainly at secondary, we're holding them into a system that was not suited to them then, but they had an escape, and that's my take on it. That's a personal opinion. But now, higher stakes testing, you know, since the Bradley report, because up until that stage, only about 15% of kids were going to uni, and now they wanted to, you know, the government wanted to move that to around 40, and so that was the, you know, when the universities opened the doors, that was when the sort of the whole ship started falling apart, if you like. Can I just answer that? Look, principals associations are great, and we shouldn't we shouldn't not push forward with what they can achieve, but we've got to do what we can do, and that's why, you know, in this slide, it's leading the ed revolution in your system, school or classroom. So no matter what level you're at, it's what you can personally do from this point forward. Don't wait for anyone else, all right? Don't wait for anyone else. There are a huge number of people doing what I call edutourism at the moment. So they're basically going over and, you know, visiting other schools, innovative schools all around the world, and they're doing online Harvard courses and all of this sort of stuff, but they're not doing anything. Right? You can only read so many papers, you can only hear from so many thought leaders before it's actually time to dig in and do it. Okay? And you can actually become, if you're too well researched, you can actually become too scared because you think there's now 1,000 ways that you can get it wrong. The point is, unless you do something, you're just going to get the same. Yeah? So stop what you're doing. I assume if you're in here, you're reasonably well informed, etc., and start working alongside other people that are going down the journey. So 2 years before I finished at TC, I still loved, and believe me, has anyone been to Templestowe? Yep, so one, two. If you go and you look around, it's not as great as you might think. Okay, as the principal, I could walk around and go, oh my God, look at that, you know, what is going on there, etc. Right? So we still had a lot of way to go, but just we were doing some things quite differently. Okay, so I just want to lower your expectations from the start. But what I would suggest is, at whatever level you are, just start operating there. And what we do I went down the wrong track there. So 2 years before I finished, Professor Yong Zhao challenged me and he goes, so is TC just going to be this little poof on the educational, you know, in the history of education, and we just fade to grey and disappear? And I really thought about that because I loved what I was doing, but I looked around the school and I thought, this is too much about me. It's not about, you know, it hasn't sort of taken hold within the school. And so I deliberately stopped interviewing every incoming students. I stopped being on every staff panel, and I appointed a co-principal who now, as it happened, ended up becoming the principal. And so I literally withdrew so that when I left, there wouldn't be a ripple. Okay, and it pretty much worked. So I was very pleased with that. But so what we now do is work alongside other school leadership groups who want to change. And let me say, you know, one of the concerns that I have is, and it's in your thing, Sandy, what can I do on Monday? All you could do on Monday is change up here. All right? If you're actually wanting to change your school, it's a 3 to 5 year proposition, okay? It's not going to flip overnight, but and it is personal because it's about you as the leader, no matter what level you are in the organisation. It's about you as a leader and your world views on what is the appropriate relationships between, you know, adults and students. It's about how do we treat staff. It's all about the culture of the school, and I didn't understand that. All right, it was only when I started trying to implement physical change, you know, let's align the timetable, let's have students on staff selection panels, let's remove year levels. When I tried doing that with other schools, it didn't take. They were doing the stuff, but it didn't change the culture. And so now, having worked alongside 43 or 42, 43 schools, I now understand it's actually about changing your culture, the way you as humans relate to other people. Because that's all schools are, is a collection of individual human beings. And so now what we do is we've got a whole sort of range of things that we work alongside. But when you go to a conference, if this is resonating you, when you go to a conference, often you feel like you're the odd one out, you know, like other people are talking NAPLAN and data and all of this, and you're going, but what about the kids that are not succeeding in this space? Okay, and what the FSA is a collection of schools that are moving forward along that line. The thing that we help them do is find what we call the grey space. All right, so you know, New South Wales, for instance, which people think is like ridiculously tied down with regulation and so on. Basically, we found a loophole in NESA, okay, which is the authority, right? And so in Melbourne, we found a loophole in the F to 10 planning guidelines, which said that if any student was on an individualised learning plan that was signed by the principal and by their parents, they could operate outside the school curriculum plan. So when we were audited, and the auditor came in, who I asked for the head of the VCAA because, like anyone else, and there would just be a review of the review. So he came in and he said, "Peter, show me your curriculum plan." And I said, "Here it is, 2 lovely lever arch folders." And he's going, "This is quite conservative, actually. I wasn't expecting this." And I've gone, "Thank you." And he's looking through it and he's going, "Now show me this student and this student and this student's work." And I go, "Well, I can do that, David, but it won't look like this because they're on individualised learning plans." He goes, "Oh, that's coincidental. Show me this one, this one and this one." And I've gone, "Well, they too are on individualised learning plans." And by this, the penny dropped and he's going, "How many kids are doing this?" And I've gone, "None. But if anyone ever did want to do it, there it is." Now, when we started working with schools in different jurisdictions, New South Wales said, "Oh, well, that's fine with you. We've got mandatory minutes and all of this sort of thing," right? Mike Saxon from Liverpool Boys High, who's just been, his school's just been recognised as by the I don't really like the Educator Awards, but they're there, and it's good for him to be recognised for it because it means that he becomes less touchable by the system. It's pretty hard to go after the principal of the person who's just won best state school in Australia, okay? But Mike came and looked at TC and he's going, "I want to do this." And I told him about our loophole, and so he went home and he spent 2 days going through the legislation. And what he found was that there's a loophole in the New South Wales one as well, and that is the mandated minutes is only if you want to get a ROSA, which is I don't know what a ROSA is, but it's like a Year 10 leaving certificate. Now, if your highest qualification is a Year 10 leaving certificate, you've got bigger problems than that, okay? And so what he found was that all schools are mandated to provide the ROSA, but students are not mandated to do it. So in his elective structure, he has got essentially stars beside sub-subjects because he has to offer it in order to get funding, but if they don't choose not to do it, then he's off the hook. So now at Liverpool Boys High, they too will start with a foundation year and then everything becomes elective after that. And so students can graduate in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years or 8 years. All right, now that was in the tightest regulatory framework. Now, it's not like the interesting thing about this revolution is that there's actually no opposition. There's actually, most revolutions, when you have one, you've got to then put bodyguards on your kids because they can disappear and that sort of thing. Our only enemy is the inertia of the system. All right? It's the inertia of the system. Do not ask for permission. Because if you go to a bureaucrat and ask for permission, there's nothing in it for them to say yes, because if it goes wrong, it's going to blow up in their face. All right? So there's nothing in it for them to say yes. If it goes well, the prin's going to get all the glory. Yeah? But if it goes badly, bang, up in their face. So they will say no. But my experience is privately or through the back channels, they'll come up and give you a pat on the back and say, "I'll let you know if there's a rocket coming," or, "Good on you, keep going," and those sort of things. Because if they can pretend that they're ignorant of what you're doing, then they can't be held accountable or not as accountable. Okay? So don't ask permission, just do. We are. And the problem is, and I know a number of the ministers for education, and they say we will always listen to the parents over you. That's it. So as Yong Zhao said to me, stop worrying about what you can't control, Peter, and just do what you can do. All right? So that's the message to you. Do what you can do. Yeah. You do not need to put your hand up. How conditioned are we? Seriously. We are no, but this is what you need to know, okay? Like this, I did this presentation for some people in the Catholic diocese, and they got like furious. I've done this like many times, but these guys got furious. We're not in a cage, like they were really like nasty. Anyway, I don't know why, but you just go with it. Yeah, I think they were in the cage. I think it had been pointed out to them, but this cage. This was taken last week with that filter that you can get on Apple. It's great. But, honestly, this is ingrained. Like, I don't know about you, but my kids were playing school long before they got there. All right, and that was what it was preparing them for. Yeah, so it's ingrained in us, and so it cages can keep you safe, but they can also tie you into ways of thinking. The scary thing is there's a mental model of what success looks like. Okay, and it's go to school, get a good result, get a good ATAR, go to uni, get a job, get a mortgage, and have 2.1 kids. The problem is that narrative, and that's another reason why it's changed. That narrative is now no longer true. All right, front of the New South Wales major newspaper. All right, 2 years to get full-time employment once you get a degree now. I think that's good, and you should do it. I don't know is the answer, right? What I would say is hook them up with us, and we'll show them how to change. Because and I know that sounds like I'm continually plugging, but that's all I know how to do. Okay, I don't operate up here. We make change on the ground. All right, and the biggest change that we make is rather than replace one system with another system, what we do is actually empower the young people to take the journey that they want to take. Because let's face it, none of us know what's going to happen in the future. It's best guess at most, isn't it? So to then impose that for 13 years on somebody else, that's a big call. You better be damn sure that you know what the future is going to hold if you're taking responsibility for what they're going to do. All right? And so instead of that, we just give the students, we give them the information. It's not like there's no role for the educator or the staff that they work with to provide them with good advice and help them scan the future of what sort of skills might be important. But we basically, and that's a worldview that young people are actually able to make good decisions in their own best interests. And when we did that, we found that they could. Now, if you talk about outcomes, all right, this is in a school that's now 1,200. 98% of parents either happy or very happy. Can you imagine that? 98% of parents happy or very happy. As a politician, wouldn't you die for that? Seriously? Right? Because they're all voters. But the reason that they're happy or very happy is they can change anything in the system that affects the young person, as long as it doesn't take too much extra time of the schools. Can take as much of their time. If they want to run them from one end of the state to the other to get the best vocal teacher and piano teacher, that's fine. It can take as much of their time as they like. It doesn't cost any extra money, or not much extra money, because we did have some money. All right, and it didn't negatively impact on somebody else. That was basically the rule. They could change anything. Anyone could. The staff could. The students could. By giving them that agency, they were able to take control. The kids were happy. Their mental health was so much better. Honestly, it was we didn't actually get any statistics on that, which really annoys me. But the incidence with which it presented would have been 20% of normal, eating disorders and things like that. I went to this eating disorder thing. I thought I haven't been to one of those for a while. I should go and see if anything's changed. Went there, sitting beside the head of wellbeing, and I've gone, have we got anywhere near the incidence of this? And we could name the kids on one hand, all right? Because the biggest predictor of mental health is a loss of feeling of self-control. It's a loss of feeling of control. That is the number one determinant, other than biological, of mental health issues. Anyone disagree with that? No? And so in our case, even those kids who had controlling parents, when they came to school, they were still in control, because we saw them as our primary thing. Now, I'm not saying flip the system. If you're sitting there and going, but it's working well for most of my kids, that's fine. Continue doing it. All right? We don't have to have the same thing, just like we've got the same thing happening for every child now, all right? And it's working for some and not for others. My suggestion to you and to the schools that we work with is don't do things to people that they don't like. All right? That used to get you kicked out of the sandpit. All right? Don't do things that people don't like. So if the current system is working well for them, let them continue. But find those kids for whom it's not working and allow them to be the ones that change. You don't need to flip your whole school. Do it for 20 kids, do it for 10, do it for 3, all right? Work with those who it's not working for, and I can tell you what, those parents are going to be delirious that at least something is happening, right? That at least somebody's, proposing some different solution. I think they are. One of the things that we do, we've got a thing called building awareness is the first point to cultural change. Like that is, cultural change is actually pretty well documented, and we use a methodology called adaptive cultures. But the first point of that is building awareness. So we have a slide set of 140 slides, similar to some of the stuff that Parsi's got actually. And what we say is every time you talk to parents, every time you talk to staff, every time you're presenting at assembly, for instance, 2 to 3 slides. Came across something interesting the other day, guys. Another slide, and you just do 2 or 3, you drip feed the information, and what we know is after around 6 months, the parents and friends or whatever it is will come to you and go, hey, you keep banging on about, all the change that's happening, what are we doing about it? And at that point, you know that it's then time to start some of your actual, physical changes and system changes, because then you're not pulling the people, they're actually driving you, and you can then lead them into the future. And what I would say is that is symptomatic of what we're doing to the students. Okay, because if you're an underperforming student, or you just don't like school and things like that, you just don't engage. You turn up, you might bodily be in the room, but you're not, actively engaging in it. And if you've got any sort of streak of defiance in you, then you'll actively undermine, your own success. But what I've seen is where young people are empowered to follow things that matter to them, they achieve extraordinarily good outcomes, because even at the top, and we know that from our PISA data that our top performing students are actually underperforming, right? So our most academic students are underperforming as well, because they learn to game the system. Do we not know that? They know that it's, basically memorise a whole lot of facts and then regurgitate the party line that the teacher's putting forward. And so even they are not achieving what they could be. If you move to a student-empowered model of learning, your outcome distribution actually widens. Okay, so your top students will just surpass anything that you thought that they were capable of in the traditional system. But some students, and this needs to be acknowledged, for some students they can not achieve as much as well, because they won't necessarily engage. But we won't be doing them as much damage, I guess is what I'm saying. So the lack of effort, I think, is systematic of a system that they just don't buy into. And this is not one that you have to just cop my answer. So one of the interesting things that happened in WA is their Year 9 NAPLAN results were terrible, and they basically introduced a policy that Year 9 NAPLAN was going to be a precursor before you could go on and study your senior certificate. And they had just a jump in their NAPLAN results that was unbelievable. Okay, because the Year 9s, the reason our Year 9s do poorly in NAPLAN is not because they're not learning, they're just defiant. It's sort of the Australian thing that, just don't try. I don't know, that's my experience anyway. I think that's a really good question, because I think money is integral to this whole discussion. TC, out of an $11 million budget, ran a $1 million surplus. All right, so unlike most innovations that, it's X plus, X plus 10%, X plus 20%, ours was cheaper to run. And the simple economics behind that is we didn't run small classes. So we had at one point we blew out to 170 electives, because nothing was compulsory, right? So 170 electives. The timetable was so simple to do, we had a past student doing it. Okay, so it wasn't a hard thing to work out or anything like that. But what it meant was there were never small classes. So like our smallest class, and that was only because we were being generous, you know, we could run like a class of 15, or like that would be a small class for us. Now, for those that work in secondary, you know, the 15 is still on the profitable side. Our staffing ratio is 1 to 15, so one teacher to 15 students. And so in the state system in Victoria, you never bank money, because if you end up with money and then something breaks, and our buildings are shocking, like they were 45 years old, they were breaking down all the time. If you've got money, they say, well, you've got money, you fix it. And so we knew that we only ever generated $10,000 surplus any year. So we ran a program, what would you do if we had $1 million? And we put it out to the students, staff and parents. We talked to them about recurrent expenditure, capital expenditure. Our kids were brought in to all the financial decisions of the school. We had students on, you know, on finance committee, on wellbeing, on the executive, like they were on every committee, and so they knew the economic costs of everything. But literally, we talked to them about that. They said, we would like an extra psychologist, we would like a 50% social worker, etc. And that was what we did. We spent it all. So I don't know if that sort of specifically answers your question, but this system, right, of remove, essentially, like we've worked out that you don't come out and say that you're removing year levels, because it freaks out the parents, right? Because they don't know what to say at the dinner party. That's essentially the problem, right? They, you know, oh, what year's Joseph in? Yeah, well, he's in this school that doesn't have year levels, and he's sort of like doing some subjects at year 9, but he's finishing VCE next year, and you know, it all just becomes too complex. So we just say, you're in year 9, but half your course load's in year 10 or 11 or whatever the case is. It's not shortening the course. Most students still end up doing their 6 years. I don't know why, they just choose to, you know, it's normal and that sort of thing. The issue is that we don't have small classes. So a small you know, a small art class or, you know, dance class has some students from that would have been in year 8, 9, 10 and perhaps some 11s in there.